This is the Lectric One. It's a high-tech commuter e-bike with some really unique features that are pretty much unheard of at the $2,000-ish price point. Lectric said they want this bike to be the first thing people think of when considering the best commuter under $10,000. So did it hit that high bar when we tested it? Let's take a ride and find out. Welcome to Electric Bike Report, and thanks for joining me today. My name's John. I did a quick review of the Lectric One earlier this year based on our hands-on experience at Lectric's announcement event for this bike, so I'm stoked to get into the details of our full review in this video. But before we jump in, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, and please remember to help support us by using our affiliate link in the video description if you decide you'd like to get a Lectric One of your own. Finally, I want to mention our news and entertainment show called The Weekly Recharge that releases every Sunday, so please also be sure to tune into that. Griffin and I have a lot of fun making it. Getting back to the Lectric One though, I want to start off by talking about some of the bike's unique high-tech features, primarily relating to its drivetrain. So instead of an external cassette on the rear axle, this bike has a Pinion C1.6 gearbox, which is an internal system of gears at the bottom bracket. And instead of a chain, the Pinion system is connected to the bike's 750-watt rear hub motor with a Gates carbon belt. The Pinion has extremely fast and smooth electronic shifting. It can be set up to downshift automatically after a brief pause when you come to a stop, and it can shift when the bike is stationary or when the system is under load. On top of that, its sealed nature means its gears are protected, they wear less, and the system as a whole is extremely low maintenance. The gearbox needs an oil change annually or after roughly every 6,000 miles, and then the Gates carbon belt I mentioned is rated to last at least twice as long as a traditional chain. We think Lectric really went above and beyond by including this system, and we're really not sure how they did it, especially because it's typically only seen on extremely high-end bikes well above the One's price point. Another thing to mention is this bike's super fast motor engagement and how it feels and responds when pedaling. Now, the One uses a cadence sensor to engage its motor, and where most of these types of sensors are activated by a series of 12 or so magnets, this one uses 96, so it can turn on and off almost instantaneously. And then, as with many of Lectric's other recent models, the bike's motor output uses current-based limits for its pedal assist system instead of the more traditional speed-based limits, and that means that it feels a lot more natural in comparison to pedal. Finally, I think it's important to acknowledge the One's super nimble handling. As you can see, this bike is relatively small. The solid parts of its frame sit pretty low, its wheelbase is relatively short, and it has 20-inch wheels with 2.5-inch wide street tires. So with this combination, it's extremely maneuverable with quick steering and great overall stability. To run through the rest of the bike's specs and components, its 750-watt motor is made by Suto. It peaks at 1,310 watts. It cranks out a maximum of 85 newton-meters of torque, and it runs quietly thanks to Lectric's M24 stealth technology. The motor is powered by a removable, fully external 672 watt-hour battery that slots in behind the seat tube. The drivetrain I mentioned uses a 39-tooth chainring paired with a 24-tooth cog on the freewheel, and the belt is covered by a guard. The bike's tires are made by Chaoyang, and they include sidewall protection and 3 millimeters of puncture protection on the tread. The One has a hydraulic disc brake system with 180 millimeter rotors on both wheels. Ours came with a rear cargo rack and a custom sport saddle, as well as alloy fenders on both wheels with an integrated LED headlight on the front and a tail light that functions as a brake light integrated into the rear fender. Up in the cockpit, we have a set of 660 millimeter low-rise handlebars with locking ergonomic rubber grips on an adjustable and collapsible stem, and we'll talk more about the reason for that later. There's a central color LCD display, there's a thumb throttle on the left next to the bike's control panel, and then the shift levers for the Pinion gearbox are on the right. A few final details should wrap things up. The long-range version of the bike that we tested weighed in at just over 61 pounds, including a 7-pound battery. It has a total payload capacity of up to 330 pounds, including the rider and any weight on the rear or optional front cargo rack. It ships as a Class 2 e-bike with throttle and pedal assist up to 20 miles per hour, but it can be converted to a Class 1 with the throttle deactivated or a Class 3 with pedal assist up to 28 miles per hour. The bike is UL 2849 certified, while the battery itself is UL 2271 certified, and it comes in a single frame size with a single color option, which is this nice metallic dark gray or graphite color. That should cover all the bases, so let's move on to our test sections and see if this really is the one bike to rule them all. First up is our brake test, where we tested the Lectric one to find its average stopping distance. We did this by performing 3 separate tests, where my fellow reviewer Griffin pedaled up to 20 miles per hour, hit the brakes at a marked line, and then measured how far the bike traveled before stopping completely. The final result was an average of 17 feet and 9 inches, which is significantly better than average when compared to other commuter e-bikes we've tested. Those bikes had an average of 22 feet and 7 inches. So there seemed to be a combination of factors that affected this bike's performance, including its weight and the width of its tires, but also potentially a few other factors. So at 61 pounds, the one is about 5 pounds lighter than average when looking at those other commuters, so it's a little easier to slow down. And then it's not uncommon for this style of bike to have tires over 2 inches wide, but we haven't seen too many that go up to the 2.5 inch mark, so a little extra grip on the pavement likely helped slow it down a little bit faster as well. On top of that, most of this bike's weight sits extremely low, so it's entirely possible that its center of gravity was a factor, and then its battery placement behind the seat tube may have helped as well. We've often seen that bikes with this style of placement have shorter than average stopping distances. Personally, I found the brakes were extremely powerful and effective, definitely on the more aggressive side as they slowed the bike down super quickly. The wheels didn't lock up at all, so braking was really quiet. The bike could fishtail a little depending on how I was balanced, but that wasn't really anything out of the ordinary. Clearly, the Lectric one is off to a great start here, and we're happy to say that its braking performance is great. Next up is our speed test, where I gathered some data to show the Lectric one's speed profile. I went out to the bike paths and recorded my average speed in each of the bike's 5 pedal assist settings, and I did this both in its Class 2 and Class 3 modes. I also tested the bike's throttle acceleration to see how quickly it could get up to the max of 20 miles per hour. So let's go out and see how the tests went, and we can analyze the results back here in the studio. All right, we are here for a Class 2 speed test on the Lectric one, and I am starting off with a very casual level of effort on the pedals and no pedal assist. We're going kind of right around 7.5 miles per hour or so, maybe a little higher depending on the path. So let's go ahead and go up to PAS 1. All right, so just a very slight little nudge from the motor in this setting. Very quiet. I don't know if you can hear the motor at all. There's just a very slight little, it's not even a whine or a hum. I don't even know how to describe it, like a whir, I guess. Anyway, so we are up to about 9 miles per hour here. Go ahead and shift up. Yeah, holding pretty steady. Let's go up to PAS 2. And we'll shift up again. Definitely got some oomph to it. Picking up pretty quickly here. We are up to right around 15 miles per hour, maybe a little above. And again, holding pretty consistent. So let's go up to PAS 3. I mean, feels, very easy to pedal. Very smooth power. Strong but not aggressive. And we are hitting that Class 2 ceiling in PAS 3 here. So we're reaching 20 miles per hour. I would not expect any change going forward, but let's go ahead and bump up to PAS 4. Yep, same thing. And PAS 5. Same thing as I would expect. So, okay, well that's the Class 2 test. We'll come back for a Class 3 test and then see what happens with the throttle. All right, so we are back for a Class 3 speed test. We're starting off here in PAS 1, kind of at about that same starting place, right about 9 miles per hour. Let's go ahead and go up to PAS 2 and see if that holds steady. I believe we were around 15 or 15 and a half before. Up to about 15 and a half, but then kind of settling maybe kind of between, or I guess maybe more right around 15 miles per hour. Okay, yeah, so that seems to be about the same then. Let's go ahead and go up to PAS 3. So, a lot of power here, definitely. The ride is easy. That's been apparent in both tests. Definitely picking up pretty quickly again. We hit 20 in PAS3 before, so let's see what happens this time. Okay, so I'm in the highest gear now, kind of just allowing myself to ghost pedal. I could keep up with the speed of the bike with faster pedaling, but just gonna kind of see like where the motor kind of falls naturally. And it looks like maybe around 22.5 miles per hour here. Again, maybe a little different depending on the path. Yeah, so about 22.5. Let's go up to PAS4. Okay, that's definitely got some power behind it too. We are up to 27 miles per hour. Excuse me, 27 miles per hour, and a little above, around 27.5. Well, we are powering all the way up to the class 3 limit here. Okay, 28 miles per hour it is. Let's go ahead and go up to PAS5. I would expect nothing to change, but let's see what happens. Up to, 28 miles per hour here. Okay, well, that looks like our pedal test. Let's go check out the throttle. Okay, we're back for a throttle acceleration test. Let's see how quickly we can hit 20 miles per hour. We'll go ahead and start in 3, 2, 1, go. Ooh, definitely a little punchy on that throttle. That was fun. Picking up 18, 19, 20. Okay, so we went a little above 20, but then back down. Everything looks good. Let's call that our speed test. To run through my results from the pedal tests, I started off with no pedal assist at 7.6 miles per hour, and then in the class 2 test, I reached 9 miles per hour in PAS1, 15 miles per hour in PAS2, and then 20 miles per hour in PAS3, 4, and 5. In the class 3 test, my speeds were the same in PAS1 and 2, so 9 and then 15 miles per hour, and then things started to get faster in PAS3, where I topped out at 22.7 miles per hour, and then I reached 28 miles per hour in both PAS4 and 5. We typically look for consistent increases in speed between each setting, which looks like a smooth angled line when we graph our data. In the class 2 test, the bike looked good in PAS 1, 2, and 3, but then at least on flat ground, I hit the class 2 limit and the bike could not exceed 20 miles per hour in PAS 4 and 5. Now, I do want to point out that PAS 1 and 2 do have specific speed limits, and the current-based PWR programming kicks in above those levels, but that is something you can change in the settings menu. I personally preferred the PWR programming in all levels, and I found the power output even in PAS1 to be plenty effective unless I was dealing with some hills. Moving on, the class 3 test shared the same speed limits for PAS1 and 2. Overall, the bike's speed profile here looks a little better than the class 2 model, with 4 relatively consistent steps up in speed, and then only 2 assist settings that ended up with the same speeds. As it is, the test showed that the bike has either 3 or 4 assist levels for flat ground, depending on which class setting it's in, and then either 1 or 2 high-powered settings for tackling hills. In both cases, this bike felt fine when pedaling, but we hoped for more graduated control over speeds, especially in the class 2 portion of the test. When I tested the throttle, you could definitely see how powerful this bike is with how punchy it was and how quickly it reached 20 miles per hour. The intensity of the acceleration is adjustable through the bike's settings menu if you want something a little more toned down, but I've got to say that I had a lot of fun with how lively this bike felt with its default settings, and there's even a punchier mode if you want even more power. Next is our range test, which is actually a series of 2 tests. So first we pedaled the one out on our local shared use paths in PAS5 until its battery was empty, and then we did the same thing in PAS1 after we recharged. Both times the bike was set to class 2 mode, which is as it ships, with a maximum of 20 miles per hour. So this gave us a minimum and maximum range that most riders should fall somewhere between, and those results were 31.6 and 53.2 miles. Both figures are relatively average when compared to similar commuter e-bikes we've tested. The low end there is 30.7 miles at the time of filming, while the high end is 57.6. We didn't quite reach Lectric's advertised range of up to 60 miles, but we're pretty satisfied with our results considering the motor and battery specs. Based on a 672 watt-hour battery and a 750 watt motor, we figured our minimum range would only be about 15 miles, so we were really happy to reach a little over double that number. I do want to circle back to the One's acceleration force, which I mentioned is adjustable through its settings menu. So there are 4 settings, 0, 1, 2, and 3, with 0 being the most forceful. The default is 1, but we noticed the bike burned through battery charge pretty fast when in either of the 2 highest settings, so we changed it to 3 for this test to help conserve some battery charge. Personally, I'd probably recommend 2 as the default setting. This seemed like it would be the best balance of fun and efficient, but of course you can adjust it as you like. In the big picture, the One's results are super practical for a bike that's meant to get you to work or school and back every day. The ability to go over 30 miles should cover a pretty serious commute, and the ability to squeeze over 50 miles if you have a really long ride or you don't want to recharge that often is really nice. We're pretty happy overall, even if there's a little bit of tuning you might want to consider depending on your needs. Finally, let's talk about the Lectric One's climbing ability, which we tested in our hill test. Our test location is called Hellhole Trail, which is a steep paved path that's 1/3 of a mile long with a 12% average grade. We tested the bike using its throttle and its highest level of pedal assist, and I'm going to pass you over to our tester, Justin, so you can see what happened and hear some of his thoughts along the way.
Okay, we are on a bike I have been waiting and salivating to get my hands on, and that is the Lectric One with the Pinion gearbox. So we're on the throttle test. We're headed up so far. Like, this bike feels super peppy on flats. So far pretty good. Right around 12 miles an hour through that first turn. That's kind of my first checkpoint. Down to 10.9, 10.8, 10.5. See where it bottoms out. Looks like right about 10.4. So the motor is very quiet. In fact, I hear the front hub clicking more, which I just like. Just kind of feels high end, which is nice. Wind's picking up a bit, but we'll let you listen through this section. Yeah, so I don't know if you can hear hardly anything there other than the hub clicking. Right about, got down about 10 miles through there, so felt pretty peppy. Again, this is it's a lighter weight kind of city commuter bike, and you kind of feel that on this hill. It's just a nice smooth feel. You hear the Pinion gearbox shifting, which is cool that it's doing that even on throttle. And let's go to the tape and see the results. Okay, we are back on the Lectric One doing the pedal test now, and really curious to see how this feels with the Pinion gearbox as I'm shifting uphill, which one of the coolest things about that is just you're totally fine to shift under tension up the hill. I don't get beat up this hill very often. He's going fast. So anyways, right about 12 miles per hour right now, and feels really easy. I am not pedaling hardly at all. Very natural. I just shifted. That Pinion just shifts so smooth and so well, even under tension. I'd let you listen, but you can't hear a thing on this motor. Very quiet, very natural feeling. We'll see what the results are. I don't know if it's going to be like the most speedy bike we've ever had up here, but it feels speedy. It just feels, again, super lightweight, really natural. I'm in a nice, comfortable, upright seated position, and it is not having any problem for me climbing this hill at a very natural pace, cadence. So yeah, we'll see what the results are.
By the looks of things, the One didn't have any trouble finishing the test, and our numbers back that up. Justin finished the throttle test in 1 minute and 30 seconds with an average speed of 12.1 miles per hour. His pedal test was a little bit faster, coming in at 1 minute and 23 and an average of 13.1 miles per hour. Now, the commuters we've tested previously averaged 1 minute and 44 seconds on throttle and 1 minute and 21 seconds when pedaling. So the One's pedal test was right about average, but it did significantly better than average by 14 seconds in the throttle test. This is about what we expected based on the one's motor output and our previous experience with electric bikes, which tend to feel pretty powerful. As I mentioned in the overview, this motor peaks at 1,310 watts with 85 newton meters of torque, and that peak wattage in particular is on the higher end for a commuter. Our methodology suggests that peak wattage seems to affect the throttle results most, while torque seems to have a bigger effect on pedaling, and the one's results back that up. In my testing at our secondary location, which is called Pilot Hill, I was definitely impressed with the bike's climbing power. Both of our test spots are not hills that you'd want to climb without help from a motor, and I can attest that the one not only makes climbing steep hills possible, but also super easy and a lot of fun. I tested the bike in PAS 3, 4, and 5 to make sure that the power levels of these settings were different, since each had the same results in our Class 2 speed test earlier. In PAS 3, I finished the test in 1 minute and 35 seconds. My result in PAS 4 was 1 minute and 10 seconds. And then in PAS 5, my time dropped to 1 minute and 4 seconds. So it is clear that there were differences. The power level of PAS 4 is definitely much closer to PAS 5 than PAS 3 is to PAS 4. So you may not need to go all the way up to 5 unless you're dealing with a real monster of a hill. And for the record, I tested PAS 4 and 5 in Class 3 mode, with both tests ending up only a second faster than my Class 2 tests. Bottom line, this bike has plenty of power to help you out on steep hills, and you definitely have the option to take it easy and let the motor do all the work when using the throttle if you don't want an active pedaling experience. When we talk about ride quality, we're talking about all the factors that affect how a bike feels to ride. Some of the main elements are sizing, fit, and comfort, handling, motor engagement, the user interface, and more. So let's take the one back out to the bike paths and talk about some of these basics, and then we'll go a little bit deeper once we get back here. All right, let's talk about ride quality here on the Lectric One, which is of course a commuter e-bike. So the riding position here is pretty upright, at least where I have things set right now. I've got a slight bend at the waist, putting a little bit of pressure on the handlebars, but for the most part, very comfortable and relaxed feeling. There is a quick adjust stem that allows you to change the handlebar height and reach, and also adjust the riding position. So if you want something that has a bit more of an aggressive forward lean, you could definitely do that. I have things set pretty vertically right now. I have good leg extension right now as well. So there's about 8.5 inches of adjustment in the saddle height there, and there's a couple inches above where I have things set right now for riders who are taller than I am. Lectric recommends this bike for riders from 5'2" up to 6'4", and I'm 5'11", so kind of in the top third of that height range. But again, feels great for me where I have things set, and then there's a little bit of extra room there as well. I think looks can kind of be a little bit deceiving with this bike. At a glance, it does seem to be kind of on the small side, but Lectric did a really nice job engineering it to fit a wide range of riders. I do also want to talk about the feel of the ride. So there's no suspension on this bike, so you do feel those bumps a little bit for sure, but the tires also kind of help to absorb some of that. The tires themselves are 20 by 2.5. They're street tires, they're made by Chaoyang, but the diameter there, the 20 inches, gives you a really nice handling, very maneuverable, very agile, and then the 2.5 inch width is really great for a commuter. Makes it feel really stable without being super heavy and oversized, and then also does add that extra little bit of cushion as well. Let's talk about the motor. That is a 750 watt hub motor with a cadence sensor. I want to go ahead and show you how quickly that engages. So I'm just kind of coasting right now, slowing down a little bit, bumped up to PAS 5, which is that highest assist level. And then I'm going to spin the cranks here to show you how quickly the motor activates. We'll do that now. Okay, so that was nearly immediate. And of course, this thing does have quite a bit of power behind it. That's kind of a highlight about this bike. So Lectric added an array of 96 magnets into the cadence sensor so that you do get that near immediate power delivery. And then in combination with the PWR programming, just makes the ride feel really natural. You're not really set to, limits as far as your speed goes. It just gives you power up to a certain amperage level and feels really nice going up from there. And then it's also worth talking about the Pinion gearbox here a little bit more. We've talked about that before, but a couple of extra features here. So there are 2 modes that you can select from, or I guess you could have both deactivated and just take advantage of the electronic shifting. But so there's a start select mode that allows you to set a starting gear. So every time you come to a stop, the system automatically downshifts to that gear so that you're ready to go right off the line. And then there's also a pre-select function that incorporates that start select feature, but also I'll see if we can kind of activate this, but basically it downshifts as you coast, so that when you pick up your pedaling again, you're kind of in a target range for a selected cadence, which I have set to 75 right now. So yeah, I did hear that. I don't know if you'll be able to hear that. It's pretty quiet, but it is happening as I'm riding here. Another thing I wanted to mention that I forgot about earlier is there is a cruise control function here. I've had a little bit of trouble activating it, but so basically if you hold the throttle and then hold the minus button, there's a thing on the display. Okay, so it did activate there. You can see the little cruise label there, and then now I'm not having to pedal. The bike's just kind of doing all the work there. So anyway, let's go ahead and bounce back to the studio, and we will wrap things up. So this is really a section where I think the One shined the most. Everything from the fit to the handling to the cool tech features just felt like they all came together really well to make for a unique, fun, and very cool experience. One thing we haven't talked a lot about is the highly portable design of this bike. If you're at all familiar with Lectric, I'm sure you're aware that the brand got its start by making extremely popular and affordable folding bikes. The One doesn't fold, but it can break down a little bit to make it easier to store. There's a quick release lever on the through axle for the front wheel. The quick release pedals pop off to make the bike narrower, and then the handlebars can fold down by releasing the collapsible stem. There's also a handle built into the frame that adds some reinforcement, and with the battery removed, it weighs only 54 pounds, which is pretty manageable to lift and move around. There's one area that we identified with some room for improvement, and that's the bike's display, and more specifically, its battery readout. The bar-based readout was pretty inconsistent when we were doing our range tests, so it was tough to know how much charge the battery actually had, and we ended up pedaling a ways back to the office when the battery died. For this reason, we prefer percentage-based readouts, which tend to be a bit more reliable, so we encourage Lectric to go that route in the future. I also want to mention that if you have fairly big feet like I do, you might need to be fairly careful of your foot placement on the pedals. I wear a US men's size 12 shoe, and if I wasn't careful, I found my heels clipping the seat stays pretty regularly. It wasn't a huge deal, but I did have to shift my feet more forward than I usually prefer. Otherwise, I was really impressed by the One's motor engagement and how natural it felt in its lower pedal assist levels. And of course, the pinion system was a real treat. I had the pleasure of reviewing the Stromer ST5 earlier this year, which is a $12,000 commuter e-bike with a pinion gearbox similar to this one, as well as a whole bunch of other premium features. So it was really great to see some high-end tech on a bike this affordable. The electronic shifting is really nice. In fact, I found myself getting a little bit spoiled since I could shift easily on hills, but I think the automatic downshifting that happens when you coast or come to a stop is really the icing on the cake. There's just a whole lot less to worry about with the Pinion and the belt drive combination since they're both super low maintenance, and I hope we get to see this kind of transmission system on a much wider number of e-bikes in the future. It's also worth mentioning that there are a couple of apps you'll want to download to make the most of the user experience. The Pinion Smart.Shift app allows you to switch between the start select and pre-select modes I mentioned, and you can also reverse the function of the shift levers. That was actually my preferred setup. There's also the Carbon Drive Belt Tension Tool app for the Gates belt that allows you to strum the belt like a guitar string to make sure it's tensioned properly. Both apps are pretty simple, so I'm not going to walk you through them today, but I do want to point out that there's a bit of a trick when pairing with the Pinion app. You'll need to turn the bike on and hold the downshift lever for 3 seconds so that the unit enters a pairing mode, and then the app should be able to connect. So to recap, the One's ride quality was awesome. This is a super fun bike that's really easy to use, and that also makes it really easy to recommend. So is the Lectric One the one bike to rule them all? Well, I'll let you decide that since everyone's needs and preferences are different, but honestly, this is a sweet bike that you should definitely consider if you like the commuter style, or if you're looking for something with a bit of flair that you won't find in too many other places. The Pinion system is awesome, both because it makes the bike incredibly easy to operate and also because it's super low maintenance. As with any e-bike, you'll still want to get the brakes serviced regularly, and you should check the belt's tension every so often to make sure it's set where it needs to be, but otherwise it doesn't get much easier when it comes to owning and operating a bike. The One did a solid job in our testing with its best results in our brake and hill tests, and good results in our range test with a few tweaks. This bike showed that it'll absolutely get the job done when it came to our speed test, and of course if you like bikes with a bit of punch behind them, I think you'll dig what this one has to offer. We liked the One's quick handling, its comfortable ride, and its techie feel. We'd encourage Lectric to find a display unit with a more accurate battery readout, but otherwise we think the brand nailed it. The One absolutely gets our stamp of approval. If you want to take a closer look at this bike, you can check out our written review using one of the 2 links in the video description, or head over to Lectric's website with the other link. Again, please be sure to use that link if you decide to make a purchase. It really does make a difference in allowing us to keep making reviews like this. And if you found this review helpful or entertaining, please give us a like, drop us a line down in the comments section, and share it with your friends. That's all for this one. Thanks for taking a ride with me today. Again, I'm John with Lectric Bike Report, and this is the Lectric One.